Okay, so I assume everyone's aware this is a session on advanced mapping with Tableau. My name's Tom Brown. I'm also joined in organising this presentation with my colleague Craig Bloodworth. I'll be doing the majority of the presentation. Craig may jump in with questions. Craig, if you can hear me, please feel free to jump in if you've got anything to add. This is actually Craig's specialist subject.
Hi everyone. I'll just say good morning.
This is actually really Craig's specialist subject that I'm presenting on here. So, Craig, please feel free to jump in, because I'm sure you'll have plenty to correct me on.
Sure, will do.
Craig is, as do I, we've both got access to the chat window. So if you've got questions, please feel free to come off mute and ask your questions. But if you'd rather use the chat window, please do that as well. If you are in a noisy room, please feel free to use the mute button to keep this sort of overall noise on the call down. Is anyone else hearing that classical music?
Sorry, apologies. That was I was trying to press the mute button and I got the wrong one. Sorry, I won't do that again.
I've never noticed that happen on a webinar before, so that was quite amusing. Sorry. Particularly as I was talking about the mute button.
Oh no, sorry.
So if you feel the need to play any classical music at any time, just play it. I'm sure everyone will enjoy it. We will be recording the session, so if you think we're going too fast or you want to see something again but you don't feel like you want to ask, then don't worry, you'll get a chance to review it again should you need. But also, if I do go over something a bit quickly, then please feel free to shout. Okay, so we're going to be looking at some advanced mapping techniques, including polygon mapping, but let me just, if I can... Okay, I just changed the screen to the agenda. Could somebody confirm that they just saw that, because I had the screen locked before?
Yeah, Tom, that's
You can see that. Okay, fine. So this is broadly what we're going to try and cover today. This is the first time I've run this particular session, so I don't know much about the timings. I'm expecting it to take about 40 minutes, maybe a little less or a little more. But what we're going to try and cover is to look at the problem of mapping. I'm assuming everybody on the call is based in the UK. If we were in the US, mapping would be easy for us in Tableau. Okay, Tableau comes with good quality maps that are easy to use if you're in the US, but it's a little difficult in the UK. So we're going to try and cover some of the subjects around that, and we'll start by looking at what's in the box. What can we do very, very simply with Tableau in the UK? And then we're going to look at how we do point mapping. This is drawing just drawing points at a given location, but using different levels of the UK postcode. Then we'll look at some area mapping, and we'll build a view that shows London boroughs using different measures. I've got some crime data and some house price data. We'll look at both of those. Then we'll look at how we do completely bespoke area mapping. Maybe you've got maps that already define the country, so we're going to look at background image mapping. And all the way through, you're going to see me using geographic data from Tableau's data server. This is only going to apply to people who are, the use of the data server is only going to apply to people who are Tableau server customers, but I'll talk about different methods for people who are not Tableau server customers on the call. Okay? So let me get started. I'm going to go straight out of PowerPoint, not my favorite tool, into my favorite tool, which is Tableau, of course. So let's just start by looking at what's in the box if we're in the US. Presumably you've all done this. Take a geographic field. I've connected to Superstore sales here. I can double click on state. I can bring out postal code. Anyone that's just joined, if it's possible to mute yourself, that would be great. There's a little bit of background noise. Come on now. So I can map very simply at state level or postcode level in the US. I can flip this to a filled map, then drill right in and see shaded areas for different zip codes within the US. Okay? I can even go up to map options and add background layers if I want. Okay? Unfortunately, a lot of those things I can't do out of the box in the UK. So let's look at what we can do in the UK. I'm going to reach out to, or what I can do in the UK and globally actually first. First thing I'm going to do is grab some data. I've got some data here of Olympic medal winners. Okay. Now we should all know that out of the box we get countries. Here we have a country field in this data set. Tableau's identified it as being geographic. We can see its geographic role is country. So simply a double click is going to map this. Initially it maps it using circles, point mapping, but I can also change this to a field map and shade certain areas. Okay? That's easy. Now, if any of these, all the way through you'll see us having errors in geographic data where countries are not mapped or postcodes are not mapped correctly. All the way through you'll see us using this panel here, or from here we can say edit locations, or we can click on the little panel and choose edit locations here. This allows us to find the data that's not been mapped and go ahead and change it. Okay? I could map Yugoslavia to whatever it's called now. Okay? Czechoslovakia, Slovak Republic, etc. Okay? Now we're going to move on and see some other things out of the box, and we're going to move to the UK now. So again, I'm going to connect to a different data set. I have one here of all the schools in England. Now in here we've got postcode information, so we're going to move on to mapping these by postcode fairly soon. I also have the town. Now it's worth knowing that Tableau out of the box contains the lat-long position of all the cities and towns in the world with populations greater than 15,000. Which means I can take a field like this, which is full of UK towns. I can right-click it and change its geographic role to city. Now I see the globe icon. I can double-click it to plot all the towns in the UK. But you'll see what's starting to happen is we're starting to get a lot more unknown values. When we plot at country level, the only real unknown values you get are for countries that have recently changed their name or been split up, or ones that have particularly bad spellings. It's worth knowing also that Tableau has a very good thesaurus of country spellings, so most bad spellings are picked up. But here we've got loads of towns that have not been identified because they're too small. Okay? Or for some reason they're not in Tableau's database. Kind of a difficult problem. You're going to have to map these. Otherwise you could map using postcode, which is what we'll try and do now. Okay? So the next thing that comes in the box is postcode mapping at outcode level. Now if you look on Wikipedia and look for the UK postcode, what you'll see is that the UK postcode is split up into various pieces. The first left-hand side of the postcode is known as the outcode, or the outer, which is either a 2, 3 or 4 character, and it's that value that's available in Tableau out of the box. So let's just look at how we get that. We have a field here called postcode, which is the full postcode. Now if I try to plot this, Tableau is not going to work. Okay? Tableau doesn't know the lat-long positions of these full postcodes. So in this data set we have a calculated field called outcode, which gives us the first 3 characters, or sometimes the first 4 characters. It actually takes up the space. Right? Let's just have a look at that calculation. Hands up if you're not familiar with calculation language in Tableau, but this is much like making a calculation in Excel. We've taken a left of the postcode up to the point where we find the first space, and then we've gone back 1 character from that. Okay? And that gives us the first 2, 3 or 4 characters up to the space. Now what that means is that we can then right click the field, change its geographic role to zip code or postcode. Now we see the globe icon, and so a double click is going to map these UK schools. Okay, we can put number of records on size, change the size slider down a bit. But what we're seeing here is a maximum of about 3,500 points. There are about 3,500 outcodes in the UK. Okay, if I zoom in on London, for example, what you start to see is some clear patterns. You see these little straight lines. That's just because the outcode positions happen to be lined up. And then you see some very big circles. This is Croydon. where there's lots of schools in one outcode. So this may or may not be the right resolution for your mapping. It may be that you want a bit more detail in the mapping, okay, or you want a bit less detail. So now we're going to move on to our first thing that may be new for some of you. I suspect most of you knew everything we've done so far. But what we're going to move on to is our ability to try and map these at different levels of the postcode rather than just the outcode. Okay. Any questions at this point? Just check the chat window.
No, Thomas, I think you're fine.
Any questions at this
If anyone
point?
does have any questions, just be sure to ping them in the chat window, and we'll address them.
Thanks, Craig. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do with different level of mapping in the UK postcode is to try to map these using what's known as the postcode region. Okay, this is the top level of the postcode, and it's the first two characters. So Tableau doesn't know the geographic position of the first two characters of the UK postcode, so I need a different data set for this. Now this data set happens to be available on our website. If you search for mapping on our website, you'll find a postcode called a blog post called "Hopefully the Last Word on UK Mapping," and attached to that is all sorts of different data sets that you need for postcode mapping. Unfortunately, that post wasn't anywhere near the last word on UK mapping because it turned out to be much more complicated than I thought. But let's have a look at how we can do this. What I'm going to do here, in order to map at these different levels of postcode, one of the ways that I've done this in the past, and one of the ways I suspect some of you have done this, is to use custom geocoding. Okay, I could find a list of the first two characters of the UK postcode and a suitable lat-long position for them, and inject that into Tableau using custom geocoding. Now that causes some problems. The first one is that I need to do it on every machine that I'm using, every machine that has Tableau installed. Secondly, it also inflates the workbook size. So if you're creating package workbooks, you'll find they're 80 megabytes, and you may have only a tiny bit of data in there because all the data becomes ingested in the Tableau workbook. So I think a better way is to handle that data set externally and then blend to it. Okay, so I'm going to use data blending to get the lat-long positions from a different data set. And the way I'm going to host my data is to have it on a Tableau data server. Okay, so I'm just going to start a new workbook for this. I'm going to connect some data, connect to my Tableau data server. Those of you that have not used Tableau server may not realize Tableau server does this. I'm going to connect to, first of all, my UK postcode set. Okay, this is a full list of all postcodes. Let's see how many records this is. This is 1.6 million rows. Okay, you can see why I might not want to ingest that into Tableau's database because that's going to cause some performance problems. But using the data server is no problem. Now I'm going to connect to my English schools. Okay, so my postcode has lat-long by all the different elements of the postcode hierarchy. I can take postcode region, and this is the level I want to map at. So I'm going to go back into my English schools dataset, right-click postcode, create a calculated field called postcode region, which is now a simple calculated field, left 2. And now I'm not going to make that geographic. I don't need to, because by making it geographic that would say go into Tableau's internal database. I'm just going to say draw at this level. So I'm going to drop that on detail. Tableau responds by drawing a bunch of squares, which is what I'd expect. Now I go out to UK postcodes. You can see Tableau's automatically picked up the blend to postcode region, hence the links there, because I used exactly the same name. And now I can bring out longitude and latitude, and that now draws a similar map to before, but these are now rolled up to a higher level, the first two characters. Okay, simple, makes sense. The nice thing here is by hosting that data on the Tableau data server, I've made it available to my whole Tableau community. If you don't have Tableau server, you could take this data set and just make it available in the database somewhere, and people could blend to it. You could just have it as potentially a text file on your file share, or actually in one of your SQL Server databases. And on our blog post, we have a SQL Server database backup that you can download and put into your SQL Server if that's useful for you. Okay, now let's just try that one more time, but to prove we can do it at a different level. This UK postcode set has all the different levels. Postcode district is the outcode, the left-hand side of the postcode, but postcode sector is the outcode plus one more character. So again, I can go in here, right-click postcode, call this postcode sector. This one's more complicated. It needs to be a left with a find. Up to the space, plus one. That should give us the postcode sector. And now I have that. I can now plot at that level. This might take a little longer. Give Tableau a second here because it's drawing something like 60,000 points in this case. Maybe a few less than that. Only 6,000 points here, but what you see happen there is that the blend was already set up because was set up by default because the field I created was called postcode sector. The relationship was noticed immediately, so all I had to do was drop postcode sector on here. And Tableau was happy to draw that. If I zoom in, see these are now individual postcode sectors, PL17, 8. Okay. Now we might want to map in even more detail than that. We might want to map down to street level using the full postcode. And we can do that because this data set that we're using has the full postcode in it. Okay, we have 1.6 million rows in here. That's the full postcode set. But due to performance reasons, I can't map. I can't just grab the postcode and blend it into the UK postcode set at full postcode level. Tableau server is not happy with me trying to do that. It's more than happy with working with these kind of record sets, just not when I'm doing a blend. But I figure that if you're actually trying to work on the full postcode, then you're probably going to decide a region that you want to work with before you actually do the blend. So we can actually do that quite nicely because Tableau version 8 data sources can now be pre-filtered. So I can add a data source filter to my UK postcode set, which happens before anything else. So let's just see that. Edit data source filters. I'm going to filter based on my region. Filter for where I am right now. Southeast postcode region. Now I can go back to my English schools set and say that I want to map at full postcode level. Tableau draws a bunch of squares. I haven't told them where to draw them yet. And I'm going to go and get longitude. And latitude for just the schools in the southeast postcode. Okay, and you can see that was reasonably fast. If I tried to do that for the whole of the UK, then it would have been way too slow. Let's just add some streets on here. And this is the exact street position of each school, rather than having them aggregated up to some other level on the postcode. Okay? So maybe that's a new technique that people haven't seen. Very quick ability to map down to that level by blending into the data set rather than having to use custom geocoding. And also by hosting that data on the Tableau server, you're going to get much quicker response times and you're going to get the ability to share it with other people. Okay? Right, now we're going to look at some area mapping. We're going to look at drawing polygons. Any questions at this point? Give you a second. No? Okay. Anyone learning anything new? Everybody know this already? Okay, let's do some polygon mapping. I'll start with a new workbook again. I'm going to go into my Tableau server here. Okay, let me just actually open I've got a finished example of this, so I want to show you some things in here. Okay, so what we're going to look at is drawing polygon shapes. Okay, we're going to draw this view here, drawing London Borough polygons with the ability to switch the measures that are being used to shade the areas. Okay. Is that a question from someone? Sorry, that sounded like a question. But what we need to do before we can do this is just understand how Tableau draws polygons, which is why I've drawn this particular view. Now this is a single polygon shape from the other slide, from the other worksheet. But what I've done, instead of drawing a polygon, I've said to Tableau, just draw circles where the polygon would be. If I ask Tableau to draw this as a polygon shape, I need to introduce a field called path. And Tableau knows to follow the dots based on the path field in order to make a shape, as if you were doing drawing by numbers like we did as children. If I show you the data set that's being used to support this, you'll see that for a given area, the path field defines each of the latitude and longitude points that make up that shape. 668, 669, etc. Okay, if you follow that path field, you'll end up drawing a shape that becomes Kingston upon Thames. Okay. Now, you don't need to go and find out the lat long of all these points. We found this data available on the web. We make this kind of data when we find it available on our blog. Some of this data has to be purchased. I'll do this with a postcode set in a moment that we purchased for a few £100 from a company called Map Mechanics. Let's just go back and show how we do this from scratch. Now what I'm going to do here is, again, I'm going to reach out to what I would refer to as a utility data set. Okay, this is not where my real data is, but I'm going to reach out to this data set, London Borough polygons, which I'm again hosting on our data server. Now the reason I'm doing this is because this is quite a complicated data set that I don't want anyone else in my organization to have to go and get. I just want it to be available to everybody. Then subsequently I'm going to blend in some data to it. So let's draw this polygon. Now normally I would switch off the drawing here because Tableau is going to draw some funny images on the way, but I'll show you this because it's good to explain it. Firstly, we're going to bring out longitude and latitude. We always have longitude on columns and latitude on rows. If you have trouble remembering where they are, they're in reverse alphabetical order, longitude then latitude. Now we want to bring area name, which is each of the London Borough polygons, down to the level of detail. Now we have a dot for each because we've got the average latitude longitude of their points. Next thing we're going to do is change this to a polygon, which is going to create a crazy shape because we haven't told Tableau how to draw the polygon shapes. But when we go for the polygon shape, the path target is revealed. This causes the polygons to be drawn. Probably clearer? Okay. So that's our base data set. That's our kind of utility data set. At this point I actually like to go into map options and switch off the base layer. You recognize this as London and you recognize these as the shapes within London, so it's not necessary to have the base layer behind. Now this time we're going to use blending again, but we're going to try and blend in some measures. Okay. So I'm going to reach out to another data source. I've got something here which is house prices for London boroughs, and I can just drop this onto my map. Say OK, connect live. Now this has the same field in here. I'm going to blend on area name. You notice I've got area name here, area name in my secondary data source. So I can now bring price and drop that onto color. Okay. But I actually want to create a report that lets me switch between prices and crime rates. So I'm going to reach out to a second data source with measures in it. I've got one here with crime data. Drop this on as well. Cheat sheet 1. Connect live. Now here I have a slightly different problem. I've got spatial district name instead of area name. So I need to go and create a relationship between my base data, which is the polygons, and this new crime data. Custom relationship will do it. Area name equals spatial district name. Okay. And now I can bring crime count onto color instead of house prices. Okay. But actually I want to allow my user to switch between them. So I need to introduce some other techniques here. I'm going to go back to my London Borough polygon set, and in here I'm going to create two calculated fields. House prices, which I get from my house price set. And a second one called crime, which I get from my crime data. Now I'm going to create a parameter which allows my user to choose. Needs to be a string, it's going to be a list, crime or house prices. Copy those. Let's make this parameter visible. Okay, that's working, but it doesn't do anything at the moment. I now need to create a new calculated field within my London Borough polygon set. I'm going to call this measure to show. I'm going to put a case statement in here. They're the two values I had, so I'm going to say when crime, then when house prices, then end. And then in here I'm going to choose crime, and here I'm going to choose house prices. Okay. Now I don't want crime count on color anymore. I want my measure to show to be on color. Now this is showing now house prices, and now it's showing crime. Okay, so I've been using the polygons as a base set. I've blended into two data sets that relate to the polygons, house prices and crime, and then created a parameter which lets my user choose which one they're seeing. Clearly, if I wanted to put them side by side, I could have created two views and moved them onto a dashboard. Okay? So that's how we do polygon mapping. That's how we introduce measures into polygon mapping. Let's just look at some other data sets that we have available for polygon mapping. We've got this one here, which is postcode districts. So this is one that we paid for. This is the one, Robin, that I think you said you'd be interested in using. I'm going to put district on level of detail. So this is the postcode district, the outcode, the left-hand side of the postcode. Change this to a polygon. Goes crazy. Point ID on path. I think I need sub-polygon ID on path as well, actually. Oh no, I think I just need point ID on path. We should be able to see that this is all the different polygon regions, polygons for each of the postcode regions. Let me put a border on there so we can see it. I think I do need that now to close those gaps. There we go. And so you could see that you could blend data into this just the same as using just the same technique as we did for London boroughs. Gets a bit crazy when I go in that detail. But if I reached out to get I think I have a set of data in here. Hang on. Oh no, I've lost that for now. Anyway, I could use exactly the same technique to blend in and shade these postcode regions by some other measure. Was that what you were trying to do, Robin? I think we discussed this before the start of the webinar. You said you were trying to look at shading postcode regions rather than just point mapping.
Yeah, that looks great. Thanks.
So this is a data set that we unfortunately can't share for free because we've had to pay for it, but there's a company called Map Mechanics out there. There's a bunch of other companies too, I'm pretty sure, that sell this kind of data.
Okay, we'll have a look at
the one thing about, so I think we only paid maybe £500 or £600 for this data set. Oh, some more classical music. I think we paid about £500 or £600 for this data set. A small challenge that comes with it is that the data set is often not in the format you need. When we contacted Map Mechanics, they said what data format did we want. They asked us whether we were using business objects or Cognos or various business intelligence tools. They weren't familiar with the format required for Tableau, so we had to convert it from the format they gave it to us into the format that we looked at earlier, where the shapes are defined by this path and the lat long as two separate fields. When it came to us, it was all in one cell in Excel and so on, so we had to do a little bit of pre-processing on that. Although Map Mechanics did say that if enough people asked about getting Tableau shaped data from them, they would shape it in that way for us, which was nice of them. So. Okay, so let's look at one more thing before we wrap up. Many times in the real world we see people saying we want to map on top of polygons, and the polygons they want to map on are things that they define themselves. Okay, so they may see the world in a certain way, and this is an example of that. Okay, maybe these are formal regions of the UK, but you may have these maps in your own business where you've just sliced the UK or any other part of the world into 2 or 3 different areas, and what you're not going to do is go and find the latitude longitude positions of all the areas that you've chosen to slice them up. So when you've got an image like this, we can use this as a background image for Tableau and plot directly on here. Okay. When we do that, instead of using the lat long position of these geographic entities to position them, we position our dots using an XY coordinate system. Okay. So let me take you through how we do that. I'm going to create a new workbook here. Now I'm going to connect some data which I've just completely made up here. Just open it for you. So I've got 2 sets of data here, 2 tables which I'm going to join inside Tableau. One is the region ID. I've got there's 11 regions on my map, and then I've got sales figures for those regions. Then I've got another worksheet here with the region name, its ID, and the XY position on the map, which I'm going to plot against. Okay. The reason I've done this in 2 worksheets is because I don't want to have to write these XY positions more than once. Whereas over here, I may just have some more sales figures as I make more sales. Okay. These IDs will relate back to the region, so I'll only have to put the XY position in here once. Okay. So let's go through the steps to do this. I'm going to connect to this data set. Actually, let's just do this a slightly different way. I'm going to connect to sales figures. So now I need to go and get my XY positions first of all. So I'm going to right click sales figures, bring a new table in, add table, region positions, join to these using an inner join on region ID equals region ID. Okay. Now that gets me the XY positions that I need for this mapping. These fields can all live up here. Okay, and my next step is to go to my mapping, and here I can use a background image. So go to background images and choose the data set that I want to attach the background image to. So the first thing I do is add an image, go and choose the map that I showed you a second ago. And now I need to say, well, how does my data relate to this background image? I'm going to say that my x coordinate is determined by the field x, my y field is determined by y, and I've said that my actual image runs from 0 to 100 on the x-axis and 0 to 100 on the y-axis. Now I'm also going to make this image washed out so the data comes to the front. I can define the washout here. Okay. And let's get it started. I now want to position x here, y here. Not quite, hang on a second, I think I need those to be measures. Okay, now you can see my maps come into play, but way down here, right? So I want this at the level of a region ID. Okay, now we're sort of getting there. Okay, I want to make this an average, and this to be an average. Now again, you can see we're kind of getting there, all right? What's happened here is the map's now all slid off the page. That's because I know my map is running from 0 to 100. So I can resolve that by fixing this axis. And fixing this axis too. Okay. Let's make the marks a bit clearer. And make the marks based on sum of sales. Okay. Now what you can see is that some of the marks are in the right position. Okay, this is the sales for Scotland. But most of my marks are down here in the left-hand corner. And that's because I haven't yet gone into my data set and determined the XY position for those. Okay. So the main trick here, everything I've done so far, a lot of people know, but they often ask the question, well, how do we determine the XY position for these data points? So that's the trick I'm going to show you now. There's a few different ways to do it. You could do it in an image editor and work out the pixel position. But this way is quite neat because it's all inside Tableau. So I'm just going to right-click the background and annotate using a point. Now this gives me the XY position of this arrow. So I can now say, let's sort the East Midland point out. And 6835 looks like that will work for East Midlands. Hit back to Excel. Region position for East Midlands. 6835 I think I said. Yeah. Just save this worksheet and update the view. And my East Midland point now plots roughly where the arrow was. Do that again in case you missed it. For West Midlands, 5528. Save. F5 to update, and West Midlands moves into the right place. Okay. Then, of course, to tidy up this map, once I've moved all these points into play, I'll just exclude those for make it look like I've done it. Remove that. Now I can actually hide these axes to complete my map. Okay. I probably want to get rid of the zoom control as well. So now that no longer shows. So this is another way to look at doing area mapping. Perhaps you've already got one of these maps available, or you can download a map from the internet if you're using something like Strategic Health Authorities or something that's known and there's going to be maps available out there. Go ahead and download those and plot on top of that. So, okay, we're coming to the end. We are exactly 40 minutes. Look at that. I didn't plan that really. I just want to summarize. First thing to say is, as we can see, UK mapping takes a little more work. The techniques we've used here, some of them aren't necessary if you're mapping inside the US, but pretty much anywhere else in the world you're going to need to know these techniques if you want to get good with mapping in Tableau. the best way to move ahead with this kind of these techniques is to learn them using the kind of examples we've seen today before you try and apply them to your own business solutions. In the real world, you're going to find you've got dirty data, you've got lat long points that don't match, you've got geographic entities that you don't have lat longs for, and so on. So it's better to learn the techniques to know that you're comfortable using them in Tableau before you try and apply it to your business solutions. The other technique we learned here was hosting utility data sets, the postcodes, the polygon boundaries, hosting them on the Tableau data server. It's a very performant way to use that data, and it's the easiest way to make this data available to a large audience if you've got Tableau server. If you don't have Tableau server, then host this data inside your database and make a data source that people can connect to. Some of the data you've seen today is available on our website free of charge. Please help yourself to it. And some of the data you're going to have to pay for. The postcode polygons that I created, we bought that from Map Mechanics, as I mentioned. So I'll wind up there. Apart from questions, I think we've just we have one question on that. It's just Craig posting content on our links to our blog on the chat window there. I'll wind up there, but happy to take any questions before we finish up. If anyone wants to stay around and chat, please feel free to. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening.